We have the pleasure of having with us Eli Zheleva. She is the founder of uspeh, a HubSpot Platinum Partner agency. She's dedicated to making a tangible difference to businesses and their people. She's a recognized speaker, author, and HubSpot Certified Trainer and Mentor. And she's also named one of the UK's top 50 women leaders. So we are so happy to join you here today, Eli.
Wow, what an introduction.
Well, you
How do I
deserve
follow
it.
that? Thank you very much. It's super amazing. Obviously, I have worked hard to achieve those things, and I have put a lot of time and effort into learning and mastering HubSpot over the years. So I'm glad that now I have the options to give back and to answer questions that people have and to be able
Yes,
to address issues that um, a lot of people, because what I'm finding is that sometimes people cruise along with HubSpot without quite knowing what they're doing, and they have a vague understanding, and they're looking at something in isolation without necessarily recognizing what impact that could have further down the line. And HubSpot, like any CRM, is a living and breathing system, which means that it's important to make sure that when you change one thing, you know how that could impact the rest of it.
absolutely. And it's not many people who dare to do a live Ask Me Anything. That absolutely shows that you know a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
If
So,
you're ready, we can dive in with the first question from
yeah,
our community. Yes.
fantastic.
So they were wondering how to link Shopify orders to companies.
Ah, okay. That's that's a good one, yeah, because um, as with the native integration with HubSpot, you link orders to contacts, and very often, I think that maybe that's why that hasn't been thought through necessarily from HubSpot site or even from Shopify, whoever created the integration, because very often the e-commerce websites, what Shopify is, tend to be B2C, and obviously, if it's a Gmail address, is who could you link it to? But when it comes to the companies, a relatively easy way, I think that we can do this will be to use association labels. So let me actually share my screen so that
Go
I can
ahead.
better illustrate how it could be done. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Now, if we were to have a look at orders and you have different orders here, you have different people linked to the orders. And again, if we're working with the hypothesis that given that we want to associate with companies, the people linked to the orders themselves would have a company email address, because otherwise it would be very difficult to figure out who has purchased what. However, if we have an order that is linked to an email address like this, um, what we also know is that, okay, the order is linked to this customer with email address eagcpa.com. Chances are, and obviously that should have happened anyway, that there is a company record within HubSpot that has the same email address.
Hmm.
And because the contact is the link between the order and the company, HubSpot has now the option to associate objects based on a matching property. So the question, I guess, is how can we get the domain name from the company, which already exists on the contact, to be on the order, so that we can match the order with the domain name to the company with the same domain name. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Absolutely.
So the way to do it would literally just be to create a property on the orders that will be called, I mean, you can call it whatever, Shopify, no, order domain sync, because it will be a sync property and we'll be syncing from the contact that is linked to the order. And we would want the email address, but actually not the email, my bad, the email domain. And in terms of association labels, that shouldn't matter at all because the hypothesis is that it should be one-to-one relationship with one person connected with one order. So that's why whether you choose something here or not shouldn't make any difference, or leave it as all association labels. And again, it's the same here because the first created and the most recent created should be exactly the same one because it's only ever
Mhm.
going to be one.
Mhm.
And then you create the property. And if we go back to our orders, and we search for this, that hasn't come through just yet. But at some point soon, we'll be able to see that populated. And in the meantime, what we can do is let's very quickly validate whether this email address exists as a company domain, the email address, the domain name, whether it exists as a company domain. So EAGCPA, just to sanity check. EAGCPA. Okay. It's doesn't have a name. Let's call it the same. EAGCPA. Cool. Okay. So now we know for a fact that we have a company that has this domain name. And of course, we don't have to do those checks to start with because we just need to trust the system.
Mhm.
And the reason we would trust the system is that every single time a new order comes in, if the order is linked with the email that is, well, the contact that is not in HubSpot, HubSpot will create the contact. And therefore, if it's a net new contact, it's also going to check whether there is a company with the same domain that the email domain for the contact is. And again, if it doesn't have that, it's going to create a record for that. So that's why
Mhm.
we trust that given that the order is already coming in linked to contacts, they would have pushed into the contacts into the domain name. So we were expecting to see that, but as I said, just so that we can talk through why um, why we should be seeing that information. And now what we have is that we have one constant in terms of value, not the property name, but in terms of value. And we have the company domain name on the company. We have the email domain on the contact, which is going to be the same as this.
Mhm.
And we have the sync property on the orders. There you go. So order domain sync, which then means that all we need to do, and again, just to check for demonstration purposes, as I said, we don't have to check it, but just to check with this company, that when we log into it, are there any orders? Excellent. So nothing is linked, which means that we're expecting once we fix this to be able to see orders there. And then we create a workflow that is going to do the association. And sometimes, as I see when people create um, when people create workflows, sometimes there is confusion if multiple objects will be involved in the whole process and data reference and so on, which object to use this as enrollment criteria. And the way to think about it is that whilst in the context of what we're doing, it doesn't matter whether the company is linked to the order or the order is linked to the company because it's the same thing. It's important to decide which thing is going to happen more often. Is in a way what is the trigger? And of course, we want when a new order comes in, for that, that's a criteria. When a new order comes in, for that then to look for its parent company. And with all the properties, I mean, this is a safe property. The, the created date is a safe property to say that if it's known, because every single record when it's created has that date. When that's known, that means the order had been created, and therefore what we need to do is just one simple action. Okay, association. That's a mini hack from many years ago, by the way, that I have learned, designed for myself something that if you are looking for something, even if you're searching a document, and if you want to see whether a certain word had been used, but if the word you're not quite sure whether it's used as a verb or as or yeah, or a noun, yeah, or even adjective. So it's good to stop up until here,
Hmm.
where the root is exactly the same. So it doesn't matter whether it's association or associate, it's still going to come up. So click on create associations, and literally we say that the enrolled order, we want to link it or to associate it to the company. And we can create it without a label. We can have it as primary and matching property values. And this is where we say, okay, the property on the object you're associating from. Because we're associating from the order, we would be looking at domain sync and then company domain name. Actually, that's it. Once we save and enroll, the system is going to, obviously, because we decided to enroll everything that's currently in the database, when the system goes through every single order, is going to try and match the order domain name, the new property that we created, with the company that has exactly the same domain name. That's how you do it. Let's just validate that. EAC, no, EAGCP. Of course, it could take a minute for this to work. So that's something that is good to be mindful of with HubSpot, because obviously a lot of processes are working sometimes, or depending on the volumes that you're rolling, sometimes there's a little bit of a lag in terms of what when you see the data to show up. And of course, one of the most safest ways to validate that is to go within the workflow itself, have a look at the performance history, enrollment history, and you see that only 2 deals have been enrolled, which basically means that it's very likely that there's still some that are waiting to enroll. And if we look at that, okay, let's have a look at our orders then. The risks of the live show, right?
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
get there.
Okay, so this is the source. So let's validate then, which again is another common thing that we see. The created date. I would have thought, aha, see, that's not filled in, which means that because there is a very similar property, which usually on all the other objects like deal, company, contact, tickets is called create date. But on the orders, it's created date. So I think that we should have been using this. Let's go back, and because so it happens that it's exactly on those two that are different ones.
Hmm.
That's why it's not associated the ones that match the domain. So it's not like the workflow hadn't worked. It's just that we've used a different data point that you know we've used a different data point based on which to do the test. So, and now we say yes, enroll, and again we wait for half a minute. We check the performance history, see what's happening, and as new ones come in. This is another thing to look out for when you're looking at the workflow that has had iterations over time. HubSpot now has this checkbox to primarily show you the ones from the latest version. And if you want to see everything, sometimes you need to remove it. So um, we'll see whether that's the reason why it's not being pulled just yet. There you go. So another hiccup because we decided that re-enroll is going to be off because in real world scenario, you don't want orders to re-enroll in the workflow because the idea is that once it's associated, there's no need to reassociate. So
They're rolling
let's,
in point one. Just give them a minute and
yeah, but we first
Mhm.
need
No, I
to
know, but they
re-enroll
will
and
come
yes,
up in the other when we see the table.
yes, there you go. Beautiful. Okay,
It was
so
taking a little while.
yeah, it seems so. Okay, so let's find that company again then. This one, and there you go. Now, obviously, you can create your report based on how much money has this company generated for you, as opposed to different people within the company, which is the type of report that businesses needs to see company to company relationship. What is the average order value? And what is the total value? So
Brilliant.
that's
Thank you,
yeah, and
Ellie.
you're most welcome. And it's worth noting that sometimes you might be inclined to think of a solution using the data hub. And of course, that's a super powerful tool. However, for a simple thing like this, it's worth asking yourself the question, is it worth me paying the £600 a month to do this, given that it's possible? Of course, if it's not
Mhm.
possible and if other systems are needed to replace that functionality, you might want to keep everything in the same place. But for simple things, but again, simple doesn't necessarily mean easy.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
because sometimes people don't quite think through how to associate the data. So from their point of view, well, it's not easy to do. So we need a custom workflow
Hmm.
with custom codes to be able to augment the data. And because HubSpot keeps introducing new things on every like 20-minute basis, that basically
Or
means that
less now.
yeah, or less, yes, yes.
Yes.
That by the end of this hug, they will introduce three new things. uh,
We partners are catching up the whole day on updates. Yes.
of course, yeah. I can only imagine what it's like for the end users.
Yes. Well, the end users sometimes are very lucky to work with partners like us to help them figure all these things out that we do every day.
Yeah, of course.
Um, so another question we had
Mhm.
is why is my report duplicating data? And this we hear very, very often as well.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's I probably need a little bit more context in general on that. But the common reason is that when multiple objects are used, depending on how you have structured your data. So if we were to have a look at the reports, and let's say, oh, let's go to our orders and let's see whether we can add values to them. Because if we can, we'll be able to demonstrate how the duplication happens. Actually, no, it's more with deals. Okay. Well, so let's go to deals and let's have mm, Sales pipeline. Take. So let's have a few deals. And the important thing here is that we'll have multiple people linked to the same deal because that's and actually we can even work with just one record to be able to demonstrate the point because otherwise if we combine many, we might all just choose a random person. Fine, we can be friends with Jason. Okay, so going back to the dashboard, we don't need a dashboard, we just need a report. So if we have a look at the report, I tend to always use custom reports because I found that with the single object reports, they're super simple. I admit that. However, for the type of reports that I want to see or our clients want to see, we end up getting to 80% or even 90% of
Mhm.
what they want. And
Yeah.
then you can't do the last 10%. So even if it's a simple report, I tend to use custom reports. Now, unless there is a visualization type that is not possible within the custom reports because, and I know I'm going on a tangent to be here. So with the single object report, for example, by the way, do you know that there's the AI Sage prompts now?
I think it is connected to the AEO new feature.
Yes, yeah,
Yep.
it's super exciting. Actually, let's even go to template. Cool. So unless it's a report that is like this, or like this, that we can't recreate within the custom reports because the chart type does not exist. If it's this or this kind of report, I'll create a custom one.
Mhm.
So going back to creating a report and seeing why is the report duplicating the data. Now, we are choosing, again, one of the things to be mindful of is what what should be the primary data source. And what we found is that it depends on if it's only two data sources, that still kind of works. But if it's three data sources, for you to be able to get the report or more, for you to be able to get to the report the way you need it, you need to look at the one that is the combining one. A little bit like with the Shopify, the one that is combining the sites that need to be referenced is actually the contacts. So that's why we selected contacts as the trigger. So it's a similar thing here. And also the other way to look at it is that what is the primary thing that you want to be reporting on? Is it the number of contacts that then happen to be linked to deals and to companies and anything like that? Or is it the number of obviously whatever metric doesn't have to be number, but is it going to be primarily based on the contacts with supplementing data from other objects? Or is it going to be based on some other object? This is a little bit even tricky to explain. However, let's just dive into things and let's have a look at what works. So I've selected three data sources exactly so that we can have a little bit of added complexity, even though that wanted to report on three data sources, especially with this combination, deals, contacts, and companies, is not necessarily unheard of. Okay, so we would like to have a filter in this specific case for the pipeline so that it doesn't think it's just 10 deals. So it doesn't look at all the deals. And as I said, when it comes to troubleshooting, I strongly recommend you narrow it down to one specific record that, for example, you see here, oh, this order, I mean, it's called order, but it's deal. So this deal has a value of 2,502,930, which so it's easier for me to refer back to it. We'll say $99. Um, so it has this value, and if you can't visualize this value on the reports, there's no point in adding more deals because then it's going to be even harder to troubleshoot. So what we need is to have our filter, as I said, which will be pipeline is that's pipeline. And also the other thing that I like doing is that again I surface a little bit of data. So we want the number of deals that are created, and we know that in this pipeline there are 10 deals, so it's a good starting point. And then we have the amount, but maybe create date. And let's just do it annually so that it's a little bit easier to look at the data, so it's not so spread. Okay. And now, if we have the amount with the count, we should be able to see the exact number. But this is what I meant, that because there's a lot of data here now, which means that it's tricky to validate, oh, is that the correct number, and so on. Which means that I'm just going to delete a few. Not a few, actually, all of them.
The deal 3 was the one that had the information.
Was it? I thought it was this one, and the deal 3. No, it doesn't have context. I think that I was only looking at a number. Order 2.
Okay.
I think that was this first one. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
So now we need to see, when we refresh the report, we need to see again 10 deals. Oh, something else is here. So this thing, 2, 3, 4, 6, and not being removed. That's probably some caching there. And HubSpot's going to refresh. Wonderful. And we can even put a pound sign as a more currency. So okay. So we can confirm that we visualize the data and that works, actually does. That works as expected, which is cool. However, and let's just remove the count of deals. However, this is if all of this is part of the same object. Where the duplication happens is that create date, if I was to take the create date not for the deal, but if I was to take it for the company, for the context, for example, that is very often the reason why, see, now as though you have 2 deals that have this amount. So when you look at the data, you see, oh, okay, in March we made 434, and then in May we made 434. But the reason for that is, as I said, because if one object is linked to multiple objects, and then in one of those configuration properties, if we're reporting, especially when it comes to some, that's what I've seen it quite a lot, especially when it comes to the deal amount, if you base it on something that is not the deal property, you could get this duplication. Because as I said, in a way, it's trying to see, oh, how many people have how many people are linked to a deal where the deal amount is known and it's in this pipeline, and what is the value of what is the value of this deal, because And that's just outside of, let's see, it's even two reporting years. But what I wanted to demonstrate here is that, see, even with one single deal, how you see the information. So try to imagine what's going to happen and how much headache you would have if you were to try to reverse engineer this and try and figure out why am I seeing duplicate stuff, given that I have the same data points and I know that I'm working with whatever amounts. So the more you can isolate and work with one specific example, because if that was only showing us 434, like you did a little bit earlier, we could think, okay, fine, seems to be working. And now let's remove some of the filters that were only there to allow us to work with small data set to be able to validate the data. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, filters that are valid filters in terms of if we only wanted to report on data from, I don't know, this financial year, then that should remain. But if it was, oh, and pipeline is this, and the name of the deal is this, and the deal owner is this, and we only did that to be able to only narrow down and to work with one deal. That's because even on the count of deals, if I was to do that, there you go. And this is where people get confused. I mean, of course, for us, we remove the prices, which means that there would be some deals here. But this, for example, this number 3, I always forget that you could just zoom in. Or I can just change the aspect ratio. Somewhere here. Minimum, maximum. Cool. So if you were to click here, you'll be able to see the deals that would have made up the number that we saw. Obviously, those that don't have a number
Mm-hmm.
and the one in question. And of course, for this reporting period, it's only this, what we could say, troublesome one because of the fact that it's linked to multiple people. So that's what I would say, again, without seeing the actual data, but I would say look at how your deals are structured and what are you actually reporting on. Because if it's the number of deals per create date or per close date and their revenue, fine, because everything, all the properties are on the same object. But if you're using cross pollination,
Mm-hmm.
this is how depend if one object is linked to multiple objects, it's going to double and triple count the data.
I think that's a brilliant explanation because you minimize the data to the maximum, so it's very clear to understand and see it represented. So thank you.
Of
And
course,
we
that
have
helps me even to think through stuff.
we
I'm not doing it only for you.
one last question for
Yeah.
today, which I think is the most controversial of all questions.
Okay.
And it is, should I change my life cycle stages?
Okay. Let me take a deep breath and see what is the politically correct way to respond to that. And I I would not I would not respond directly. Let me tell you that. I will have a more philosophical discussion, a RevOps philosophical discussion. And I would say that life cycle stages. HubSpot, as we know, leading CRM, they have worked with tons of businesses over the years, a lot of people, a lot of processes, they have a lot of data. And of course, they have come up with those as standard. Are they the best ones necessarily? Not necessarily. Are they the be all and end all? Not necessarily. So does it mean that you can change them? Of course. However, you need to be mindful of when changing them, what does that mean? Because there is stuff going on in the background that not everyone is aware of when they start to change the life cycle stages. First thing that is not kind of obvious straight away, and is good for people to be aware of, is that this is a funnel. So sometimes we see customers that have stages, that it says here, I don't know, partner, and they have decided to put it here. So that is a big no-no, because the way to look at it is that whilst, yes, some people could skip stages of the process, but like in deals, the pipeline stages, it should be a linear, well, the funnel thing, with the idea that it shouldn't be branching off. So we would like to have people, let's say if they were to subscribe to the blog, and then they download assets, and then they have met the criteria based on engagement to become MQL, and then they become SQL because they've been qualified. Having partner here suggests to the system that people need to go through this stage to be able to go to the next stages, which obviously is not correct. And said in plain English, it's obviously that it's not correct, because we don't want to, and people shouldn't become first partners before we have commercial deal with them. So if you want to add stages, by all means, still consider how many are relevant, whether you need them, whether you could reuse some, and so on, and have them here at the very bottom, because that doesn't change the flow. Now, some people, kind of rightly so, because depending on process and so on, between marketing qualified lead and sales qualified lead, they have sales accepted lead. Whoops. And of course, this is another challenge that, not challenge, another thing that we have seen. They think, oh, we need to add a sales accepted lead. Fine, they add it here, they add save, and they think they've added it. And of course, it shows in the drop down, so you've added it. But in terms of being able to report on the conversion rate, how many of those become the other ones, that's not going to work.
Yes,
And
especially
also,
since
go on.
the final reports request that some of those are compulsory, so if they are not met, they won't even show in the reports at all.
Exactly right. Exactly. So that's why it's important to understand what is the reason of wanting to change the life cycle stage. So there's no one size fits all. For us, for example, we don't have subscriber. I'm not sure whether we have. Oh, that's the other thing. Because HubSpot now allows you to change things, so you can't delete them, and you think that, oh, actually, oh yeah, this sales accepted. So instead of them just dragging this to be in the middle, what we have seen people do, and they say, oh, well, you see, Ellie said that things need to be in an order, and in like a certain progression and so on. So let me, in that case, do this, and then let me make this one. Like it, and then let me make this, and then let me make this. Yeah, and then you think, see, looks good.
That's a nightmare.
and and exactly, because the challenge is that once you save it, there's pretty much no record of the fact that it had been done. However, I'm not sure if you noticed or not, we had 3 MQLs. We still have 3 MQLs, but we had 1 SQL. But because we've rearranged the wording, and now suddenly we have 15 SQLs. And also in the background, there are plenty of properties that are date entered and date exited, which are very valuable properties to figure out how long, even time in current stage and so on, how long are people staying in the different stages, and therefore at what point of the process we need to have more nurture, or how do we revise the marketing/sales strategy to be able to deliver on the business objectives. So this also, again, on paper looks good, because like, see, it is what it is. It's good, that it's consistent. That's what you said. Yeah, but it all depends on how you got there. That is going to determine whether that's what I said
Mm-hmm.
or that's something else.
Yeah.
Again, for
And
us, yeah,
yes, I believe that it's also so important to have a dictionary in the team because some people may use the, for example, sales qualified lead with a criteria in mind, like let's say maybe you want to have it before the sales accepted lead because first it was qualified and then sales accepted it. Okay, but others may think like, okay, someone is going to work with it and then it's going to be qualified. And okay, so how are we treating it
exactly.
inside of the
Yes.
company? What does this mean?
Yeah, and is everyone aware that this is
Yeah.
what it means, and is everyone following the same process? Absolutely, absolutely. That's exactly the other challenge that we see, that people are, when they say that little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So people are trying to follow processes, but perhaps the processes are not fully defined, not communicated with the wider team. And this is where part of the reasons why there is clash between sales and marketing and ownership of leads. Because they, yeah, but it reached this, yeah, but it didn't trigger my report. Yeah, because your report is looking at something else.
Yes,
Yeah, but
yes,
that's how it's always been.
yes. You
Okay,
can
so
choose the
let's
word you
step back.
want. You can choose the word you want as long as it is agreed within the company that that word means that. And then we're talking the
Yes,
same language.
yes.
I know, Ellie, that you have your time already set for today. I really want to thank you for sharing all this information with us and all your knowledge. Please let
Of
us
course.
know if we want to contact you. How can we contact you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. That's
Mhm.
one of my primary channels, and it's just Eli Zheleva. And given that in the English speaking world, my name is kind of unique, so you'll find me for sure. The other one is through the company page, which is uspeh, and that is USPEH. Find us, and we'll be happy to help. Thank you very
Okay.
much for your time.
Thank you, and
Thank
we'll
you.
talk soon at another
Fantastic.
AMA.
Yes. Have a
Okay.
lovely one.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.